Hey guys, so I just got the Boss SDE-3000 EVH edition digital delay pedal. And the first thing I did was I wanted to learn the pedal and I wanted to set it up in front of 3 real speaker cabinets and mic it up and do it the way it's supposed to be done. And then I posted some clips on Instagram and I got some questions. And it occurred to me that not everyone really understands how you're supposed to set this thing up. So you get this great Boss pedal, you're really excited about it, you watched all the marketing materials, you watched all the influencers, but you get it home and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? So let me explain basically how this whole thing works. So Eddie Van Halen's rig had 3 speaker cabinets, and they called it the wet, dry, wet configuration. And the whole basis behind that is that you have, in the left you have effects, and in the right you have effects, and in the middle you have a dry signal. And the reason there is that you can have a delay with, specific settings in the left and a delay with specific settings in the right. And then you can basically anchor them all together with the dry signal. And then together you get this huge sound. The problem is if you're not a professional touring musician and you don't have all this gear, that could be very challenging to pull off, right? And it's why it's kind of left to be in the more like crazy gear enthusiast arena and less for like more common, maybe beginners or people who aren't really into gear. So, but now they're marketing it to a broad, group of people, and everyone's like, what's wet, dry, wet, and how do I get this to work? So I got the pedal home and I read the manual. And part of what the allure of this pedal is what they tried to do was they tried to make it a little bit more accessible for people to do wet, dry, wet with this pedal. But the entire concept requires 3 amps. And those 3 amps could be Boss katanas, right? Which is a clever cross-marketing opportunity, I give you guys credit. But you may not want to use 3 katanas. But let's just say you're using 3 Boss practice amps. What they've done is you can actually plug your guitar into the SDE-3000 in what they call the 4-cable method. And basically what that means is you plug the guitar into the unit, it goes back into the front of your amp, and then goes out the effects loop back into the SDE-3000, and then you can route the other 2 left and rights to 2 other Boss katanas. So have you wrapped your head around that? So basically the idea is you have the SDE-3000. It is capable of sending signals out to 3 different amps. And if you have 3 katanas, that will work for you. But most crazy gear enthusiasts probably didn't buy this to play it through 3 katanas. So the question is, how do you do this through your amp, right? And through 412s like what you see behind me. It's not easy, right? So some people will do the same thing, but they'll use other tube heads. And once again, you may not have more than, maybe you have 1 favorite amp. You don't have 3 tube heads. Maybe one of those amps doesn't have an effects loop, or the effects loops are different and you get these inconsistent sounds. So how do you do it? So I'm going to explain to you how I do it. Now this is where this goes from kind of basic to a little bit advanced. So you got to stick with me and I hope it makes sense. All right, so here are my amps. I'm going to take you back behind the scenes here and I'll show you what I do. So right now I'm using the 5152. And what I have here, number of things. I have the 5152 going into a Fryette power station. And this is a load box and attenuator. This is one of the greatest pieces of gear ever invented. So what this does is it loads down the amp, makes the amp think that it's connected to a speaker cabinet, and then what I can do is I can play this amp with the power amp on at any volume. So you create a master volume for any amp, no matter what it is. And what I do is I then use this to power the center cab, the dry cab over there, right? Now the key here, this is where the SDE-3000 comes in first. And by the way, you always have to have a Marshall behind your rig because that's what you're always really playing. Okay, so that being said, there's a line out here. And what I do is I send that line out into the mono in of my pedal, right? So it's right here. So fry it, line out into here. And then I have in stereo cables going back out into the back And those are going into this LX2. And this right here powers the other cabinets. And that is basically how I do wet, dry, wet with these two pieces of gear. Two of the best purchases ever. So that's kind of how I do it. Now I want to go back to the SDE-3000 for a second. So this pedal is basically very intelligent in the sense that it knows by how you've connected it, whether you're using 3 cabinets or 2, like you're running in stereo or wet, dry, wet, right? So in the first bank of EVH presets, which is EVH 1, 2, 3, and 4, it's assuming it's set up really for wet, dry, wet. And then when you go to the next bank, which is 4, 5, 6, or 5, 6, 7, and 8, that's really meant for stereo. So if you plan to use this in stereo with your stereo preamp or any other device, do that. Hey guys, so I know that's a bit complicated, but those are your options, right? You can get 3 Boss Katanas. You can use your existing amp heads and route them through your power sections with your effects loops, or you can use load box and stereo power amp. So whatever you think makes the most sense. I hope this was helpful. I always try to answer everyone's questions, time permitting, and I'll see you guys soon. Here is a clip of humans being in full wet, dry, wet. See you later.